If every person in the world was magically transported to heaven right now, not all of them would like it. I know. That's kind of hard to imagine. If you're like me, if you grew up in the church and rightly so have amazing conceptions of heaven and how glorious and wonderful and just euphoric it is going to be, then you would be right. But I didn't realize how kind of shallow a view of heaven I had until I read this book. It's a book by one of my favorite authors, and he really changed the world in the 20th century. He didn't set out really to do this. In fact, he set out to change the world in other ways. But as God often does, he wants to use us in ways we could never imagine. The guy I'm talking about is none other than C.S. Lewis. Now hold on for a second. You might have heard of him before. He wrote a little series called The Chronicles of Narnia, Mere Christianity, so many books. And sometimes when someone is that famous, you hear their name and you're like, oh, okay, been there, done that. Well, give him a chance right now with this book, because I believe this book can save your life if you let it. I am surrounded by books today. As you see, I like books. I have way more books than I could actually probably read in a lifetime. Everyone asks me the classic question when they see books in my house: have you read all of these? Of course, I have not. In fact, I'm kind of like one of the worst readers ever. I'm like my attention goes in a million different places, and I have about 10 different books that I'm reading at one time, and it's hard for me to finish them. But I love books and I love to read. And one of my favorite authors of all time is this guy I'm talking about, C.S. Lewis. To me, Lewis offers a lot of valuable things that I'll get to in a second. But one of the most important and most valuable things he shares with us in this book. Now, before I get to this book, I want to lay a little bit of groundwork. Lewis was for those of you who might not know, he was an atheist. As a child, his mom died. He remembers praying to God for God to heal her, but she died. And that, among other things, including the First World War, which he fought in the trenches, really just solidified his atheism. And so he was a very, very aggressive atheist, like one you would be kind of scared to talk to as a Christian, because the guy was just brilliant and he would just kind of eviscerate everyone he talked to. Long story short, he ends up converting to Christianity as a young Oxford Don and working at one of the universities there. He talks about this in his book, Surprised by Joy. I recommend that one as well. But he becomes a believer, and he goes on to write books, as I said earlier, that would change the world. In fact, earlier he wanted to really be an accomplished poet, but he really wasn't that great of a poet. But God used his writing in other ways, his fiction writing and his theological writing. Now, I say all that to say this. This is someone who had gone through profound suffering. People don't realize how much suffering Lewis went through. So when he went to write the book I'm about to tell you about, he was bringing so much to the table, so much life experience. And in fact, I believe that's why Lewis is so important as an author for us today. He had such brilliant insights into human nature, into how humans think and react. He just had an incredible gift given by God to understand people. And in fact, you read Lewis and you see yourself in like so many of the characters and the analogies he uses and metaphors and different anecdotes. And you're like, man, that's me. That's my heart. And in this book I'm talking about today really does an amazing job at capturing that. It's a book that can and will save your life if you read it. Why? Because it's a book about heaven. The book is called The Great Divorce. And it's a book that's about heaven, but kind of not. Hold on with me for a second. It's a fictional imagining of what the edges of heaven could be like. And so in the first couple chapters, you find out that there's these people living in this gray, drab, horrible city, and a bus shows up. And several of them get on the bus, and the bus begins to float and fly into the sky, and they soon find themselves out of this gray, drab world and into this glorious blue sky. And then they see this cliff coming towards them, and they fly and fly and fly in this bus and finally reach the very edge of this cliff to see that they're on this plain, and in the far, far distance is a mountain range bigger than any of them had ever seen. Well, you soon find out they are on the very edges of heaven. This is a school bus, essentially a tour bus, if you will, of people from hell. And they are getting to essentially take a field trip to the edges of heaven. It's a brilliant and creative, as I said earlier, imagining of what would happen. What would happen if you filled a bus full of people who lived in a city that was essentially hell? If you packed these people on a bus and you sent them to the very edges of heaven, and what if you sent people who knew them, who were in heaven? What if those people that they knew walked down from the mountains of heaven to the very edges of heaven and tried to convince these people to come into heaven with them? As I started off the video, I said a pretty kind of dramatic statement, one that maybe would have rubbed me the wrong way if I would have heard it several years ago. And that's this, that if every person on the face of the planet magically were able to go to heaven right now, not all of them would like it. Not all of them would enjoy the experience. This is one of the basic ideas of this book, and you find out as these heavenly beings come down and have these conversations with these sort of hellish ghosts, they have a hard time convincing them to come with them into heaven. How can this book save your life? I think one of the greatest messages of Christianity is that it is not about us. It is a free gift of salvation. But so often we hold on to these tiny little grievances and lusts and unforgiveness and essentially hold on to ourselves. The whole message of Christianity is saying, lay your life down, let go of yourself, take up Christ, receive the gift of salvation He wants to give you. It's free. But as we see for a lot of the people in these conversations, we find out that it's incredibly costly for them to lay down themselves. And in fact, when you are living for yourself, when you are obsessed with yourself, when you are not living for God, in fact, heaven, where God is and where God dwells, will not be an enjoyable place for you. Heaven is simply the place where God's reality is fully experienced. And if you don't like God now, you won't like Him there. But if you'll say yes to Him here, if you realize how good He is, if you realize how much He loves you, if you'll lay down your own life and receive His, there is a joy and a glory awaiting you you cannot imagine. And that really is the glorious part of this book. We see the hints and sort of like foretaste of how glorious heaven will be. And each and every one of us have an invitation to heaven through Jesus Christ. This book can change your life, could save your life if you heed its warnings, if you respond to its invitation to come to Christ. I challenge you, dive into it. If you haven't read it, give it a chance. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. I'm going to continue to do more of these videos, sharing about my favorite books, and most importantly, sharing about the God who they point to, Jesus Christ. Hey, I love you. We'll see you next time.